This is a recorded connection webinar on remote learning and online education in the new world. Today is Thursday, June 11th. My name is GW Childs. I'm a mentor, and I'm also a author, a curriculum writer on the courses here, and an artist, songwriter as well, and producer. I've worked on Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2, The Sith Lords, as a sound designer, as an actor on Star Wars Battlefront, and also as a sound designer for Reason 3 and Reason 4. I've got a distinguished list of panelists that I'm very humbly and very excited to be in the room with today. We've got Steve Catizone, who's a mentor out of Infinite Music in Boston. Steve's got a laundry list, a huge list of names he's worked with, like Black Eyed Peas, Tony Maserati, and more. Steve, please take a moment to tell us about yourself, man. It's an honor to be here with you today.
No, same here, man. It's gonna be a fun chat here. We're basically been writing and producing music since the mid '90s. Not to date myself, make myself sound older than I am, but work with a bunch of people. Had studios in Boston, New York, LA. We've been running studios, bi-coastal like that up until 2015. Then I came back to Boston to basically to mentor a bunch of new, young kids and basically give back. So it was fun.
Nice.
That also, now I turn it over to Junior Soto. Please introduce yourself. Junior is out of ES Audio in Burbank, California. He has worked with an amazing group of people, and I would love, please, Junior. He's also been a student at the Recording Connection as well, and his amazing story to tell, which we're going to get into. Please tell us about yourself, Junior.
Well, my name is Uriel Soto Jr. I go by Junior. And I live here in LA, and I've basically done music basically my whole life since I can remember. I started at very young age of 8. I started playing keys in my dad's church, and I just fell in love with that instrument. I fell in love with being my best friend. I didn't have any brothers or sisters, so that was just a normal thing. I would go to school, come back, play the piano, go to school, come back, play the piano. That was like my whole life growing up. It was playing keys and piano. And then in high school, I joined, piano 1-2, guitar 1-2. I was part of the choir class. I was part of the jazz band. And so just right after high school, I started joining bands, anything I could. I started joining Spanish rock and roll bands, English rock and roll bands. And throughout this whole time in my teens, I started going to studios as a session player, recording for artists, friends, anybody that could allow me to be in the studio. A young kid with an ambition, that was me, and I just wanted to get my hands wet, and that's where I fell in love with the recording aspect of it. And then going through the Recording Connection, I just the doors just opened for me, and everything that I wanted out of my life in recording and music, it was basically just laid out in front of me, and it was up to me to go get it. I've had the blessing of being able to work here in LA. LA is so big, but worked with DJ Paz, his main engineer for maybe 6 years now. Yellow Wolf. We talk about French Montana, Sway Lee. Anybody hip hop, I've been blessed to be able to work with, and still going strong. So yeah, that's my quick bio right there.
That's amazing, man. Thank you so much, Lucas. Lucas is out of Studio 369. And Lucas is DJ'd at Burning Man. He's performed at Burning Man. He is a powerhouse of a musician and a producer. Please tell us a little bit about yourself, Lucas.
Yeah, so I'm the producer, songwriter and founder at 369 North Studios here in Los Angeles. Obviously, the leaf blower picked the exact time to come over to this side of the room here, just as I'm giving my bio. But I've produced a lot of my own projects and songwriting for a lot of my own projects as well as for other people's projects. Worked with artists like Cruella, Lost Kings, a lot of EDM acts, as well as Snoop Dogg, Bassjackers. A lot of kind of more towards dance music style. But now that I've sort of owned the studio and have a little bit more than just like my laptop,
and stuff going, I've had the pleasure to be able to record some live bands and stuff like that.
Amazing, dude. Thank you so much, Lucas. Tommy, also want to be able to introduce you real quick. Tommy is you're in the admissions department, am I correct? And you're also this guy is kind of like the James Bond of the Recording Connection. And tell us a little bit about yourself, Tommy, and how you figure into all of this, man. And turn your audio on, man.
Yeah.
Now we got you.
Uh-oh.
Oh, you still don't have you, man.
Can't hear you, buddy.
All right. Check on it for a second. I'm going to come back to you, Tommy. Let me go ahead and let's go ahead and just move on just for a second. We are going to come back to you. Apologies for that. So what we got going on today, again, is we're talking about remote learning and online education in the new world. Before we move on, I wanted to also tell you that if you sign up with us before August 15th, Recorded Connection, we have an offer going right now. It's the GW Child Scholarship. If you sign up, pay the full amount going forward before August 15th, we'll take $500 off your admission. Now, let's talk about real quick what the Recorded Connection is. The Recorded Connection is a school, and it's a very innovative school, and it's a school that is handling the pandemic and the situations that are coming up in a way that is unparalleled just by the nature of what it is. But what's so exciting about it is it's not something that's new. It's been around since 1983, and it's an amazing school in the sense that it has put so many people like Junior, like Lucas, like myself into gigs where we're able to shine and rise up to a level with someone like Steve Catazoni here.
Oh, shucks.
So as we're moving forward here, let's talk a little bit. And guys, go ahead and expand a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, in your interpretation on what the Recorded Connection is as well before we get started. I'd like to start with you, Steve, since you've been around the longest of this.
Well, I mean, the fact that you have the ability to be hands-on from day one is amazing. You know, I mean, there's some interaction with teachers, mentors, and other students. You know, and there's a collaborative thing that happens literally from the day a student walks in, and the fact that you can literally handle the gear right away, and you're not, there's no clerical aspect that you're going to wait months before you actually touch something, and you're not learning from somebody who's maybe not in the industry anymore. You know, someone who's basically wasn't in the past but isn't doing it now. You're learning current things, current concepts, state of the art gear, state of the art software, and it's it's a great situation. I wish I had something like that when I was coming up.
Yeah, me too.
So,
Me too. And would you like to expand on that a little bit too, Junior?
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? I was waiting to interject because
I can feel it.
no, you know what? You were touching on the hands-on, Steve, and that to me was the most important part. Not only the price point, because if you compare it to other schools, it's not even close, right? That, to me, I come from a background where I have to work. My family had to work for everything we have. We don't have anything that was handed down to us. So when I went and researched something that was possible for me to do, and then I came across Recording Connection, the hands-on experience that I went through with Recording Connection, that is so important. That's what makes Recording Connection stick out from the rest of the schools. I'm not bashing on any school, to each its own, but you know what? I have friends that went to some other schools and for 8-10 months didn't touch a console. That's not gonna work at all. I gotta sit down and move a fader and then feel it and say, oh wow, I raised it and it sounded this way, or I moved an EQ and it sounded this way, because that's how I process. So if you put a book in front of me and I see it that thick, I'm gonna give up. I'm gonna move ahead. I'm gonna go to YouTube or whatever I gotta do, but that's not my way of learning. My way of learning is to touch faders, move, knobs, connect stuff. And so this program is just the best for that. I can't speak of how great it is for that.
I always say that the best, I mean, the way that people have learned for thousands of years was you know, you want to learn how to do something, you go work with somebody who's doing it. You know?
Absolutely.
You don't sit in a classroom and look and pay, you know, let's face it, $250,000 after 4 years, and then you get out and you get no job. You know, it doesn't make any sense. I get kids that come in and within a month and a half time, they're already saying, hey, I got somebody who wants to track a vocal in my bedroom. I'm going to charge them $35 an hour. I'm like, great, you know, and you know, it's like that fast, you know, you're in.
Nice.
So.
Hey, Tommy, are you back?
I'm back. Can you guys hear me?
There he is.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Right.
Go ahead and give us an
Beautiful.
introduction from you real quick before you get going, man. I want to make sure we got everybody covered before we get to the big
Yeah,
topics.
well, of course. Well, I want to remind everyone who called me the James Bond of recording connection. They like to say,
You are, dude.
they like they like to say that I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. I've been with Recording Connection about a decade, and I do more of coaching, consulting, admissions, finance, career services. I'm all over the place. And my biggest thing right now is just coaching and career services. I'm also an actor outside, and I do some live coaching. Because my main focus right now is helping Recording Connection.
Well, dude, you're amazing at it, man. Lucas, also, expand a little bit for us too on the Recording Connection for you. Also,
Yeah,
like what it did for you.
totally. Because it's interesting. Because my perspective on it is actually a little bit different than Steve and Junior, which I think is sort of the other aspect of Recording Connection that's really great. Is it's actually really flexible to what the student wants to learn. You know, because like some of the students, they're recording students. They want to learn about mixing and mastering and like, you know, using large format consoles and that aspect. But some of the students, they want to learn, you know, how can they utilize their laptop to create music, you know, in production and that aspect of things. And, you know, in that same sense, like having that direct one-on-one kind of, you know, working environment with the student, it allows them to pursue what they specifically want to learn, not just what any curriculum might tell them to learn. They're working with someone who can tell them like, hey, this is the useful information here. Like, this is what's actually going to let you kind of thrive in this environment.
Exactly. And this, it is an example, especially I think with what we're doing and with what the culinary school and what the film connection is doing, in the sense that the old institutions don't work anymore in this regard.
It's broken.
You need to work. It has to be a mentorship, but it also needs to be a rite of passage. It needs to be that, hey, I'm putting my stamp of approval on this guy, and I'm going to send him out there into it, and he's going to represent when I do it. It's not going to. I'm not sending out a schlub or anything like that. This is education upgraded for the 21st century, and it's practical in that regard.
Can I add something to that, G?
Please.
Yeah. So not only that, but the moment you walk in the studio as a student, you create relationships, and on top of that, you are a walking resume, because you start learning, right? You start picking up on what your mentor is teaching you. I was blessed that my mentor taught me so much stuff, and not only about just the technical stuff about music. My mentor, he was in-ear monitor engineer for Madonna, right? So I would ask him questions from left and right, and you know, you name it, I asked away. We created a great relationship to where the point where when I graduated, he said, you know what, Junior, when you run the sessions, it's basically me running the sessions. So might as well stay here and work for me. Why don't we build something together? Let's work together. And that way he can work sessions, I can work sessions. So that just attests to, if you really work hard and you pay attention to what the mentors are teaching you, you're basically opening doors there at the studio where you're learning. And then you get a great report with other engineers, with other producers, with other, you know, studio owners. So that's
And we're gonna come back to that more. Before we move on, let's go ahead and move on to the next question real quick, which is, how long have you been training students for the Recording Connection? What do you think is interesting about that? Steve, I know you had something to say, so let's go ahead and start with you on that question right now.
I mean, I think it's been like 15 years at this point. So, I mean, every kid that comes through, there's always something it's a great experience to work with them, because when you get people that come in that don't know, that they're beginners or intermediary or whatever, we jump right in at where they're at, and it's cool. I lost my train of thought. I feel like Joe Biden.
I apologize. I apologize if I threw you off, man. I'm really sorry.
No, it's all right. No, it's all right. No, it's just, yeah, I mean, it's been a great experience working with the school, watching the school itself grow. I mean, when I came in, it was a textbook that was this thick, and, they sent that out. And now, every year they upgrade their system, they upgrade their staff, they upgrade, they change with the times, which is great. I mean, you go to some other schools, like you say, they're an antiquated methodology that just doesn't work,
Exactly.
And the fact that Uriel, what you were saying, as far as being able to work with people and teach them your methods, it's great, because I've in the other room right now, I have two students, former students of Recording Connection, that are mentoring some students while I'm talking to you guys, and I know that and I trust that they're doing things the way that they should be done, and it's a good thing. I get two other guys sitting in the other room that are collabing on stuff, and it's cool that you can have confidence to basically train somebody up and know that they're going to go out and do a good job. It's just like a piece of work. When you're working on music, your name goes on it, whether it's good or it's bad. People want to know whose fault it is. Same thing with people. If someone goes out into the world and they're terrible, you're like, you trained with him. So or the other, or the opposite. I don't know why I came at that negatively, but that's so.
Lucas, how long have you been training with the students for the Recorded Connection? What do you think is interesting about it?
What's interesting about how long I've been doing it? No, I think it's been about 3 years now or so that I've been training, and honestly, I love teaching. Actually, is what's really interesting about it, and one thing that I kind of have always had as a part of my workflow is constantly being open to learning, right? So I'm very much self-taught in a lot of ways, but the way that you kind of have to keep moving, even after you feel like, maybe you're an expert in something, is to constantly, keep learning and, to keep trying to improve. And by teaching other students and teaching people, maybe some stuff that I wouldn't necessarily want to, or wouldn't think to get into immediately. Like I have a student who's into hardstyle, and I had never really made hardstyle before, but then kind of getting into it with the student, kind of almost in a sense, obviously, I know what I'm doing, but in a sense, learning with the student about, the kinds of things that make them tick, it kind of gives me a new perspective on a lot of different aspects of music, which is really cool. It's been a lot of fun.
If you're just tuning in with us right now, guys, we're doing a panel on remote learning and online education in the new world. And before we move on anymore, I also wanted to just reiterate that if you're tuning in right now, and if you happen to go ahead and decide you wanted to sign up for one of the courses here at the Recorded Connection, which is a school unlike any other, if you mention my name, GW Childs, you can get $500 off if you pay the full admission before August 15th. Now, let's move on with that same question. Junior, how long have you been training students for the Recorded Connection? What do you think is interesting about it?
I've been training them, I want to say about 5 years. Once I graduated, it didn't take too long for me to start engaging with them and start trying to teach them, because what's so cool is that, as a student, you go through these mental states. You go through these, this lesson here was hard, or for me, the hard one was patch bass and compressors. So yeah, a lot of students have trouble with that. So if I was able to figure out, I want to teach a student how it's that easy. It's really easy. You just got to figure out a way for you to learn it. And so when I started teaching them, I started just basically relating to what they're going through to what I was going through as a student. So it's been about 5 years, and it's me as a mentor now, I'm with agreement with Lucas. Is every morning I wake up and try to learn something new about what's changing in DAWs, what's changing in our world of engineers. We have to keep up to date. And so what's interesting is that the relationship that you create is in the studio with students, we go back and forth now as text, like, hey, have you seen this new program? Have you seen this new? And so they're not only learning about the program, but they're actually learning about real stuff that's going on, real things that interest me as an engineer now that I'm going to put for work, you know, compression or whatever equipment I'm using, right? So that's what's interesting. And it doesn't stop. The learning experience doesn't stop just because I graduated and I'm a mentor now. It doesn't mean that I'm still not learning. I'm really learning from students now, like what they're listening, what kind of music, what they're changing. And that's great. That's the program.
That's a big point that you're touching on there too, in the sense that when you step out of music for a while, when you step out of DJing, or when you step out of electronic music, if you're out for a year, you're behind on the plugins, you're behind on all the different techniques that are going on. It's like, and then you come back in like a year later. I mean, it's like you've got the bell bottoms on when everybody else is wearing like, you know, PVC and stuff like that, you know. Tommy, how long have you been with the Recording Connection? Tell me about you real quick. And how long have you been training?
Yeah, I've been with Recording Connection now for a decade. I actually started off in admissions and then just kind of moved my way up over the years. And this is just on some of this that you know, pretty much everyone's been saying. It's, you know, my experience is we hear, just with the staff with the Recording Connection, we hear so many horror stories about people being in debt, not getting experience, and just all sorts of things with the other, you know, traditional learning. And, you know, with the Recording Connection and the mentors, you know, G, you mentioned that this is an upgraded for the 21st century, which is, you know, true in a sense, but this method of learning has been happening since ancient times. If you wanted to be a carpenter, you know, you didn't go to Athens to Plato's Academia. You went down the street to find a carpenter to learn how to learn carpentry.
It's trade. You're right. It's trade.
Amen.
And that's what we have set up for here. It's, you know, it's the training system that works, because, you know, you'll go to, I won't drop any names, but you'll go to another school and you'll get, you know, that textbook 3rd edition, and then you'll finish the course and that textbook will collect dust on your bookshelf. Whereas just like Junior said, you know, you're still, you know, just because you finished the program, the school's not going to come in and say, hey, you can never talk to Lucas again. Hey, you can never talk to Junior again. You can never talk to Steve again. You guys have a relationship. And just like Junior said, you're texting, hey, you heard about this? Have you heard about this? Have you heard about that? And it's like, that's the continuous, it's about building the relationship. And sure, there's a structured course curriculum. Sure, there's this, you know, massive thing that's been designed by audio engineers, but that's bottom line. That's the first step. That's the education. But the real learning comes from the experience that you get and the relationship you build with your mentor, because they're giving you that stamp of approval that you got what it takes to make it in the industry. And so that's what I've been experiencing over the years.
And let's expand on what that means a little bit, because we talked about the word yesterday, Tommy, and I know all of us have kind of buzzed this around to a certain degree, but this is trade from a mentor, which is very much like the old days. But in the old days too, the mentor was the signature that allowed the student into the ecology, into the community at large, the global community, which is a very big deal, especially right now. The internet has put us connected with everybody across the globe. And if I've got Steve's name on there, I can walk into another studio and say, hey, you know, I've been around the block. I've been taught by someone who knows what they're doing. I've been taught by someone like Lucas. I've been taught like someone like Junior. And you're not going to have a problem with it. It says it right off the bat, you know, and it's how the Masons worked. It's how I mean, you can go back to the Templars, really, if you want to. I mean,
the Illuminati.
That's a whole nother webinar.
Yeah. I mean, you think Michelangelo would send like someone over to paint something without sending an approval? Hell's no. I mean, this is the real deal right here. This is getting you into the guild. We may not have like a formal, but this is as close as you're going to get to it. So if you're listening in, think about this for a minute. Now, let's move on to a question that's a little bit more into the current of things. Is we now live in a new world in which social distancing and fear of getting sick is a new reality for many. How is the recording connection outfitted to address this new reality? And I know we've all kind of had some fun with this already, but I'm going to start with Lucas on this, for example. How has this affected you? The pandemic affected you during this time teaching, Lucas?
So other than contracting COVID-19, which was very unpleasant, it hasn't been. It really hasn't been that impactful, because I've actually already been working remotely with the majority of my students, and this kind of gets to the sort of the flexibility aspect of recording connection and what that kind of gives students and allows the relationship that we have to kind of flourish even in sort of this time where, you know, maybe they can't come into a studio, maybe they can't, you know, use that console board because, you know, if they touch it, they're going to get COVID-19 or something. You can still make music, right? The times have changed. You can make music with that laptop computer and a pair of headphones. And sort of that's sort of the side of things that I personally tend to focus on with most of my students, is like electronic music production and sort of that side of things. And we've been able to really kind of keep going without much interruption at all, because really what makes this program special for the way that I teach is that personal connection, is that personal one-on-one connection that I have with a student, where we're sort of combining, you know, the work that they're doing, which is kind of the thing that I have them really focus on the most, is like making their own music. Especially for a producer, making your own music is the number one thing that you can do to get better at making music. Like, it doesn't matter what textbook you get, it doesn't matter what school you go to. The thing is, like, just practice, right? It's just doing the thing is going to get you better. So that's kind of what I have my students focus on. And then the other thing that's really going to help them is that critical, timely feedback that I can give them. And so that's really where they can improve, by spending the time in the program. And then every week they get 2 hours of feedback one-on-one. There's nobody else in the room. It's just us two talking about how they can make their music, you know, better, or what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong. And, you know, all of the aspects that kind of go into music production, we can kind of get into that on a very personal level, which is so important. And honestly, that's what I think kind of makes the program better than, say, you know, a traditional music school where you're in class with, you know, even if it's a small classroom, you got 10 people there, you know, 15 people there, and that's a tiny classroom. And there's just nothing that is going to, you know, that can't even touch one-on-one. Right? It just can't, because the teacher just doesn't have it. It doesn't matter if you've got a 3-hour class instead of a 2-hour class. It's still not going to give you as much, because it's that one-on-one conversation between me and the student that gives them the, you know, that actual expertise and the actual feedback on specifically their music.
Uri, how's this affected you right now during all this? How's the pandemic affected you so far with the teaching your students right now?
Not at all. I actually got busier. Not only busy with the students, with work. It seemed like Lucas touched on it. He said it perfectly. The technology that we have nowadays to offer us the ability to connect so fast, so quick. I mean, Lucas touched on it. A laptop will do it. I can have all the setup I want here, but all I really need is a camera, and for me to be able to share my screen, and the student is going to be catching on to whatever I'm doing. And the most important thing is the connection between the mentor and the student. It doesn't matter all the technology, all the compressors, everything that we have. If there's not a connection between the mentor and the student, which I hardly have heard that from any of us students or any of us mentors having that problem. But yeah, it's the most important thing. And so for me, I've actually gotten more busier with now the COVID and the lockdown and everything. I'm hoping that I'm staying this busy as I've been throughout after the lockout, because that has actually been a blessing in disguise. And to be honest, I don't have to go deal with traffic, getting to studio, and the students as well, right? Like, we actually just set up a time and date, we link up, we do the curriculum, we do what we have to do, and then I go, you know what? I'm a family guy. So I go handle my baby, I go handle my wife, we go out to lunch or breakfast or dinner or whatever it is, and then come back if I have another meeting with another student, and it's a pleasant experience. I don't have I have to wait an hour and a half in traffic. I don't have that somebody cut me off in traffic or whatever it might be. But I like it. I really do like it.
Steve, what have you been doing? How have you been outfitted to do things differently with the COVID outbreak, and how has it affected you at all so far?
Well, just like you, I mean, I got busier during this time.
Yeah.
You know, I got people that basically, we're doing Zoom lessons, and it took a minute to get used to using Zoom and getting it worked out where you get the sound happening the right way. But at this point, I'm working with my students. It sounds like I'm sitting right next to them because everything's.
Yeah.
It sounds like I'm listening to their DAW. It's stereo. It's it's great. You know.
Wait, you got stereo? How'd you get stereo?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
We're gonna have a whole
Yeah, we gotta-
meeting on this,
we
but
gotta talk
Steve's
about
gonna
that.
have a seminar on that. They're coming
Yeah,
up soon.
it
I
took
had the
us a
same
while,
question.
you know what I mean? But
We got to talk about stereo because
Okay.
I don't want to brag here, but I'm pretty sure I'm the one who got Recording Connection linked up with Zoom. I'm pretty
Really?
sure I was the first one to do that. Yeah.
Really? Yeah.
Not to brag, not to brag, but
No, it's I'll tell you, man, that's very, very forward thinking because I'm like, it's amazing how we're blessed in our society how technology and arts intertwine so much. I talk about back in the 90s when basically the MPC would sound grainy and it was perfect when you got a group like NWA comes up and it's a perfect thing about the angst versus the sound of the sound quality of the technology at the times. It's blended perfectly. Now you get something like COVID, which seems like it's for a lot of people it's not great, and I my heart goes out to people like that. But for me, it was perfect. We get together. I'm just like you said. I'm not commuting 16 hours a week. I'm able to sit down in the next room and work on stuff. And I have students one-on-one, and we do a one-on-one. But I also have other students checking in the room so they can sort of view what's going on. And we do a little bit of a one-on-one, mostly one-on-one. But then there's a community aspect to it too, which is great. And as far as I get clients that literally I was telling you the other day or yesterday that I had a client who basically had an artist in Turkey and another guy who's from China basically, and we're zooming back and forth. One guy he recorded his vocals in his car, and I was like, "Geez, that sounds better than some booths I've been in his car." I was like, "You gotta be kidding me!"
Don't say that,
So
Steve. Don't say
no.
that.
It's about the performance, man.
Except for the sound of the cars whizzing by, but
Yeah.
But no, it was like, people are being really creative now, which is great. And I've been waiting for technology like this to catch up. And I was like 2001, 2002, I was trying to use Logic the way we're using it now. And the virtual instruments were terrible, So I was going back and forth to New York with cases of stuff. And now, just like you said, you got a laptop, you got a set of earbuds and a tiny controller, and you're good. So people send files back and forth. I'm probably overextending my time here, but
No, this is good.
But it's great. It's great because we're working back and forth virtually, and I'm actually able to spend more time with the students because there's no commute time involved.
Right.
It's funny because audio engineers definitely have a certain personality that tends towards introverted. So I think that asking a bunch of introverts if social distancing has really made a negative impact. I think clearly we're finding that we're actually having a great time.
Yeah. Introverts never been happier, man.
Exactly.
I work with one artist, and I'm like, do you is the social distance bothering you? He goes, dude, I've been social distancing for 20 years.
Yeah, exactly.
I go to shows and I go, hey, so funny. Anyway.
Hey, Tommy, real quick. So since you're on in the school end of things as well, can you tell me about how the school's doing things differently during the COVID outbreak, what they've been doing?
Yeah. Firstly, Lucas, I want to say that we're COVIDers because I also had it. It sucked.
Oh,
No, it was terrible. I'm sorry to hear that.
It sucks. But I'm good.
Glad.
But Thank you. We have an amazing staff at the Recording Connection. Everyone's working from home. We do Zoom meetings, Microsoft Teams. As Steve said, it's amazing the technology that's available today to make this all work for everyone. And essentially, I think my hair is starting to grow back a little bit because I'm not ripping my hair out driving in LA traffic. But yeah, just a really quick comment on the introversion and the what you're talking about, relationship building, Steve, and what Lucas was talking about with introvert. It's that if you go to a classroom with 10 to 12 other students, if you're lucky, you'll have a relationship with your instructor, and you got to be really lucky and really proactive. And Most of the artistic types, they deal with a little bit of social anxiety, so that's probably not going to happen for the for this ecology, for this realm. But if you are doing the one-on-one internship, you have somebody like Steve, you got somebody like Junior, you got somebody like G and Lucas. They know that stuff. They can see that stuff in their apprentices, and they know you're almost forced to build that relationship that you need to make it in this ecology. Yeah.
Wonderful. If you're just tuning in right now, we're doing a panel on remote learning and online education in the new world. And again, just in case you're just coming in, between now and August 15th, if you sign up for one of our courses and pay in full, and you use my name, GW Childs, for the GW Childs Scholarship, which I've humbly accepted with the Recorded Connection, so kind of them, well, they'll take $500 off the full admission price. So please sign in and try if that's something that you're interested in doing. Before we move on, again, I wanted to just reintroduce everybody again real quickly. We've got Uriel Soto, also goes by Junior. We've got Lucas, and we've also got Steve, and we've got Tommy. All the tribal elders, all studio badassery going on here. And I'm my name again is GW Child. I'm so excited just to be here in the energy in the virtual room with you guys. So thank you again for attending on this. Now, let's go ahead and talk about learning online. How is remote learning with the Recorded Connection effective for careers in music? Steve, I'd like for you to start off with this one.
Well, I mean, you can learn a lot online, and no matter, as far as watching videos and stuff, but you never get that, you never get that thing where you can get right to the point of what you want to learn, what you want to be shown. When you're learning online with somebody and there's a one-on-one thing going back and forth, you can just, there's no wasted time. It's great. I don't know how many times one of the first things that students come in, they say, yeah, I want to, this appealed to me because I was trying to learn some stuff on YouTube, and I'd get 15 minutes into a video and say, this is not going where I thought it was going to go. So I don't, you do that 25 times, it's a colossal waste of time. And the online learning, the fact that there's a directivity in that's great. There's a direct, if that's even a word. There's a directness between student and mentor, like you've been talking about. So I'm a fan. The classroom thing to me is completely broken. It's cool. It's cool to have that as a part of it, but it's not the whole thing for sure.
Yeah.
Let's turn it over to you too, Junior. What would you say about how is learning with the Recorded Connection effective for careers in music?
It's so great. I was just thinking about what Steve was talking about, and it came to my mind when I was a student. I remember to pay for stuff in school before I graduated school and became the audio engineer I always wanted to be. I had a 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. job. And so right after 6 p.m., I would rush across town to get to my mentor's studio to learn, right? Really tired. By 7 o'clock, 7:30, I would get to the studio and we would go through the stuff. He would focus on exactly what the lesson was for that day, what exactly I wanted to learn. Because what Steve said right now is so important. You don't need to learn all the other stuff. If you really want to learn something, really how to use a compressor, there's basic things you really need to learn aside from all the rest of the information, which is great to know if you really want to know that. But when you're tired at 7:30 p.m. after waking up at 4 a.m., rush across town. If I had the ability back then to just call into the studio, communicate this way, the way we're doing it, it would have been easier for me. The advantages of doing it this way through online is it's just time saving. It's so effective. It's both for the mentor and the students.
There's also another thing is the fact that most students have their own setup, and if you ask them to come to your place to work, they have to lift up what they have, come into a foreign place, and potentially not. There's a comfort factor that basically we all love to work in our stations. We've all designed them the way that we like to work, and what better way to be sitting and learning in your own place, from somebody who knows what they're doing. So,
what would you like to add to this, Lucas?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the other guys said it pretty well. Just the idea that the student can use their own equipment. And honestly, even though I'm not in the room with them, I can kind of talk them through some of their equipment. I can give them, tips on home studio stuff, because at least for me, that's kind of where I came from. This studio definitely didn't start out with all the gear that it has now. It slowly built up over the past 10 years. But a lot of these students, right, they're looking for budget friendly, effective solutions for their home studio. And I'm able to give them that advice, and sort of give them that advice while they're kind of looking at their gear. So we can like pull up a picture of the gear that they're using and kind of troubleshoot stuff, things like that. And just in general, the flexibility that the online education allows, right? Because they can kind of do it from anywhere. They can do it if they're traveling. They can do it if they're, exhausted from work. They don't want to have to drive an hour and a half, to go to a studio. They can just kind of, sit down at their computer and get right into it. And that flexibility combined with sort of the one-on-one approach, I think is like the most important part, because there is a lot of online learning right now, right? There's YouTube, there's other online programs, but a lot of those online programs, that passive learning style where it's just a recorded video is really, really difficult to stay engaged with. Like it's not that exciting. And especially if you're like not sure if the information is even relevant to you, it can be so easy to just tune out and not actually open the video even, and like not be present for that, versus with that one-on-one, 2 hours of one-on-one time, they've got to be present. I know if they're, stoned or not paying attention, you know what I mean? Like I can tell. And so we, they really are sort of, there's that accountability of having that one-on-one that you're just not going to get from any other program.
I want to touch on something that Steve said earlier in the last question that I think is relevant to what, for this question as well. And you were talking about having somebody record with, in their car, and they got a good recording out of it. And that's an interesting thing to point out, because, anybody can record in their car, right? But they don't have a Steve or a Lucas or a Junior to tell them if it's a good recording.
Right.
They don't have a canary, right? So, I could, if I forgot this panel and I got home, I'd be, I'm gonna go out and record something in my car right now. If I was to go out half cocked like that, just because Steve said it was good to record that way, Steve's not be able to check it.
Yeah, don't.
You know what I'm saying? But
I'm just saying,
when you have a mentor that you're able to go back with and say, okay, I did this in the car. I don't know if it's good. But he can say, yeah, that is a good recording, even though you did record it in the car. See, that's gold right there. It doesn't matter if you used a Sennheiser or you used a Neumann at that point. You got a good recording out of it, and you've got someone that can back you up and say, no, if you put that up on SoundCloud, people aren't going to make fun of you. You know what I mean? So that's a huge thing right there. Just to have a relationship with someone like Lucas, to have a relationship with someone like Steve, to have a relationship with someone like Tommy, to have a relationship with someone like Junior, man, that's huge. And I have people, even myself, they'll try to kind of swing it in, they'll be like off my clock, or be like, hey man, you mind listening to this? And I'm like, yeah, I'll sign, if you want to sign up, I'll listen to it for sure. Totally. Because I've done that before. Take me out to coffee, and get me all happy and everything. Yeah, I know that trick one. Let's move on from that one. So, all right. So how about this one? If I sign up now, which by the way, if you do sign up right now before August 15th, and you pay the full admission price on one of our programs, then you say GW Childs for the GW Childs Scholarship Program. We'll take $500 off that full admission. So please remember that. Please use my name because it'll help you out going forward. If I sign up now, what does remote learning look like with Recorded Connection? Tommy, why don't you start us off with that real quick? Yeah.
Well, it's twofold. The Zoom meet with your mentor, and for life, Lucas said, this is not a YouTube video that you're, halfway engaged with.
Well, hold on. Wait a minute.
Live.
There's a threefold process, if I'm correct, right? Go to the admissions department first, right? And then you go.
Right. Well, if you're going through the admissions process, if you're engaged and you're already studied, you're going to have your mentor learning, but you're also going to have an academic tutor. But as far as the admissions process goes, yeah, you gotta. There's 3 steps.
Okay.
The first one is you gotta talk to the admissions rep. And the admissions rep is not just somebody who's giving you information about the program. This is who wants to make sure that you're actually serious about this, that this is something that you really want to do. They even will ask you a question in the admissions process. You know, what is it about you that like one of our mentors want to go to the program? Because the mentor does have to accept you. So that's asked at the very first phone call with the school. And so once they feel that this is actually a serious candidate, they'll move it over to the director of admissions, and that's the second process. The director of admissions will then really dig deep and prepare the student and make sure that the student is engaged and really serious about this. And of course, the third step is that, meeting with the mentor. It'll be either a virtual meeting or it'll happen, face to face, depending on if the mentor studio has been sterilized and all that good stuff. But that's the 3-step process. Is basically admissions reps. They got to decide whether you're serious. Director of admissions to decide whether you're serious, and the buck stops with the mentor. The mentor has to stamp of approval to have what it takes to make it in the industry.
So if you're tuning in, I hope you're paying attention to that part of we don't have to accept you. It's up to us. It's up to the school. Like, this isn't like, hey, dude, you got the credit card. I'm going to walk in and start making it. It isn't like that, man. You got to prove it all the way going in. It's quality. Our name's going on this. So please understand that moving forward. Please understand that moving forward. And then once we're with the mentors approved us and whatever, Lucas, for a second, take us through how remote learning would start with you. How would it begin?
Yeah. So once the student gets approved for the program and signs up, we have our first lesson, and it's kind of again, it sort of speaks to sort of the flexibility and kind of the magic of the program is we kind of start where the student is. So it's like, I don't have a fixed like, oh, this is my first lesson that I give to everyone. Like if someone has already been working with Ableton for 2 years, 3 years, I'm not going to give them a tour of Ableton, right? Because they already kind of know those basics. We can kind of immediately pull up a song that they've been working on and kind of talk about where it is that they want to go versus I also have students who have never opened up Ableton. And of course, with those students, right, I'm going to want to give them that tour of Ableton and kind of show them just a general layout of what that whole program is. Because, I remember the first time I opened up Ableton and I was like, what the hell am I looking at? Because when you don't have language, like if it's your first DAW, it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's Pro Tools or Logic or Ableton or Reaper or, any of these DAWs, like there's a language to them that once you know that language and understand like, okay, it's sort of program material over time. And that's the idea of what music is. Like even just getting that concept can be kind of daunting, and like understanding how these tracks and how it all works is daunting. And so, having that kind of like when I sit down with a student, we kind of just get right into what it is that they're trying to learn, right? Get it into, where they are in their skill level and just kind of dive right in. You don't have to wait. You don't have to get a syllabus. That's not what this is about. It's about just that one-on-one learning of like just from the get-go, improving their skills, kind of preparing them, to grow beyond the program. Because it's only a 6-month or, 8-month program. I really focus on like, you're not going to stop learning after 6 months. You're not going to be an expert after 6 months. It's just not how it works. But we can give you a workflow and sort of an idea of like how to train yourself in a way, like how to approach the process in a way where you have enough information where you can then explore other concepts and aspects of those things that will, further your skills and further your talent and your quality.
Well answered, man. I think that was between you and Tommy. I feel like it covers that part of the process pretty good. You feel like we can move forward to the next question with that?
Yeah, that was great.
Anything you want to add?
Well
to that
done.
One? Awesome. Great job, guys. That was wonderfully answered right there. Again, if you're just tuning in, this is a panel on remote learning and online education in the new world. My name is GW Childs, here with Steve, Junior, Uriel, and Lucas and Tommy. And before we go forward, again, if you're just tuning in, before August 15th, if you tune in and you mention my name and you sign up for one of our courses and pay it in full, we'll reduce $500 off the full price. So just so you know. Now, going forward, I would like to start off asking this question to you, Junior. Is it possible to make a living from a remote studio? If so, how do you do it? How has the music industry changed? And isn't it true that the music industry was always already outfitted to deal with social distancing? What are your feelings on that, man?
Oh, it's amazing the equipment that we have now available for us, and it's not super expensive nowadays to build a remote home studio or studio. I mean, for me, I've been in lockdown. I respected the county or the cities, to go lock down, and I stayed home. But I got more busier than when I was at the studio, and because I got so many clients hitting me up like, hey man, I got releases dates. Can I send you this? Can you mix this? Can you master this? Can you produce this, right? And I am not one to say no. Of course I'm going to say yes, right? All of a sudden, you see my emails just like, one after another. And so I'm lucky that like most of us here on the panel, it seems like we are gear junkies. We love to have our own space as opposed to the studio, our own little system. And I do it remotely. I do a lot of stuff that I can do at the studio. I do it here at home. I even record vocals here at home. I mean, I figure out a way to make it sound good, and I do it here at home. I bought the stuff that I need for me to do remote. I was working with a video game company recently, and all they sent me was all the audio files that we recorded to code it. And my job was to cut, clean, and code. Cut, clean, and code. And so what I would do is just literally in the morning, I would wake up, grab a cup of coffee right here with the headphones, and for like 2-3 hours straight, just cut, clean, code, cut. And so it's so much work out there that you can do remotely. Like a lot of companies know this. A lot of big companies know that, hey, I need the guy. I don't really need to pay another $1,000 for the studio. I love the studio. The vibe of the studio is just amazing, but there is so much value in our work as engineers that they really hire you for the work. And so for me, it's been great. It's a lot of, I've been doing that since probably 2-3 years. When I started building clientele as relationships, they started contacting me and saying, you know what, I have a song, can I send it to you? And of course, yes. And where I'm gonna work is depending on me, but I like to work in my space. I think one of the other guys here touched on it, the comfortness of it, like how comfortable you feel. It's such a great value to how you work, how fast you work. And then if something's faulty, where you're gonna go reach and to move, disconnect, connect, or whatever, because it's your equipment. You know what you've done connecting, routing. So I love it. I think it's a doable thing. I actually make a lot of money, a lot of work out of my home studio.
And Junior, let me ask you a question on that too, and an additional amen on that one. Is that if you had never met your mentor, how would you have had any of the contacts to be able to do any of this?
I'm just gonna shake my head and say no. It really is, because when I met my mentor, his workflow, his mentality of how to talk to people and stuff, I started applying it to my work. I've worked with him for over 20-30 years. That means he's onto something. So not only applying that to my own business, because I consider myself, USJR Productions, me, Junior, as a business. I don't want to wait for somebody to hand me the money. I want to go get it. So what I do is I've applied what I've seen that works for people that are older than me, that are wiser than me. So for me to work, I mean, this is a business that is not just handed to you, not all the time. You really have to work it. So when I met my mentor, that's one of the things that I applied. Secondly, the relationships I met through him, I can't even say enough about that. Because not only did the relationships I met through him, I met more relationships, and it just like kind of scattered over. The recording connection did everything for me in that aspect. I mean, just open windows and doors for me.
And let's talk about also what your mentor taught you to facilitate to a certain degree. And this is something that goes in all of our studios. We all have talked about this word, we said it, right? But it's not something that you can explain. It's not something that you can put in a book, but it's vibe, right? Can I vibe with you? And if I teach you my vibe, you can vibe with other people. But if you don't know that vibe, you ain't going to be able to work with Mary J. Blige because she has a different vibe, you know? It's not going to be the same with the Black Eyed Peas because you don't know that vibe. Steve knows that vibe, but you don't know that vibe, right? And it's that ability to be able to talk to people that live in that world that is so important. And if you don't have it, it literally is like talking to a wall. It's that awkwardness that nobody wants to have right there, but you need that formal explanation. It's like surfing. You can't read a book on surfing.
Yep.
You can't be a baby bird and have your mommy teach you how to fly out of the nest. The mommy has to teach you, you know, she can't give you a little baby bird book on it. It doesn't work that way.
Yep.
So it does not work that way.
I can tell you. I'm sorry. What were we going to say?
No. You go. Please, Steve.
No, you first. The great thing about a mentorship is that, I mean, you know, when I first got into things, I didn't have a mentor. I jumped in and I made, you know, you make mistakes. You make, you know, mistakes that sometimes cost you years in your life, you know, or thousands of dollars, you know. So the ability, you know,
Yes, they do.
So the ability to basically tell somebody, don't do that, you know, it's gonna, you know, you're gonna have problems if you do that. You know, having that in your corner is huge. You know, I mean, because sometimes, you know, being able to learn from somebody what not to do is just as important as what to do.
Oh yeah,
So,
it took me 8 years.
Honestly, it's more important.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It took me about 8 years to have somebody in the music industry teach me about resting my ears between mixes.
Yep.
And I can't even tell you how many crappy mixes I put out where I spent like 3 hours centering on a hi-hat. So I had the best hi-hat ever, you know, but then if I would have had a mentor that just said, yeah, you know what, dude?
Yeah.
I know you like to smoke a lot of cigarettes. Why don't you just take that outside for 15 minutes and like just chill for a minute rather than beating that hi-hat to hell and back? That would be awesome. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's that little things right there that it's like cooking too. I mean, if I was going to go into the culinary side of what the Recording Connection does, I mean, I'd want to cook to say, hey, don't put too much paprika in that, man, because you're going to have people reacting all sorts of funny ways. You know, it's a big deal right there, and you want that guy that say, hey, I've made that mistake before, man. Before you go off half cocked, it's time to take. You want to look at that. You want to look at it, and because there are those 100%. Mistakes you can make too. Where if you make them, there's no coming back from it. We're at least 10 years when everyone's forgotten about it. And that's so true with music. So true with it. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to so before we move on again, if you're just tuning in, we have an offer on a school that is not like any other school. If you sign up right now for one of our courses, we're going to take and you pay the full price before August 15th. We're going to take $500 off the admission. And you got to mention my name, GW Child Scholarships, and I'm so thankful again to the Recording Connection for being so kind and putting such an offer so other people can excel. In my name is very, very kind of them, very, very blessed. Thank you so much, guys. Let's move on to the next question real quick, which is what can I accomplish with Recording Connection? What kind of remote opportunities are available postgraduate? Tommy, would you like to start off with a little bit of this right here?
Yeah, basically, you know, one of the biggest things that and I'm sure Junior can attest to this or whatever Rolodex, but I don't have time. Who do you got? And we've got a list of graduates that we're trying to help find work, and you know, we know the mentor, we know the person if they can jive, and we'll absolutely make that connection, and they'll make money, you know, like that. Just the mentor calling us and saying, okay, yeah, Jeremy, would love to work with Steve. Jeremy would love to work with Lucas. And then, you know, they've got so much success that way. But as you said, and Lucas has said, it's not difficult to create that, you know, remote environment at home and produce tracks. And really one of the biggest things that career services will teach a graduate is how to conquer obscurity. The industry doesn't know who you are. You could be a genius prodigy, you know, you could be the future, you know, modern day Mozart, but if the industry doesn't know who you are, you're not gonna be successful. So career services helps you conquer that obscurity, make the phone calls, ask the mentor for help, and we're not telling the students to go to the studio and the mentor's the only person you can ever talk to. Don't talk to anyone else. You know, this is an opportunity to help you network and build other relationships. And so you can the biggest downfall that a lot of our graduates have is how to ask for help. And that's one of the biggest things that we coach them through is that's the only way. That's almost marketing 101. It's like, you've got to get yourself out there. You've got to push yourself and let your mentor, let your people or your contacts or anyone know, hey, I can do this. You need this. I am the one that can do it. Here's some samples of my work. And that's one of the things that we really help with.
Steve, you've hired a lot of graduates as well. I mean, this is a reality, right?
Yep, 100%. I mean, yeah, it's it's great to come across kids and see that they're talented, and then be able to be like, this is great. I can work with these guys for like 5 months, 6 months, whatever it is, and then really dig in and then get them to a point where they're able to do work for you. Or you can recommend them to other studios, stuff like that. Just there's definitely a tremendous amount of work out there to be had, and it's great to be able to have somebody that that you've trained in your methods and have them work for you. I mean, I can honestly say dozens of kids that in the time of working that we've been able to play, to give them gigs. So.
And you're referring people, like I know you, Lucas, and Junior, both you guys are referring students all the time as well. I mean, it's not just what's going on at the school too. It's the mentors are referring people, and it's like they're immersing students in the ecology. But what's interesting as well, especially when someone's working with you, Junior, I mean, they're in the studio with you, right? And they're seeing these opportunities come in at the same time. And if they're vibing, right, then of course they're going to pick up on those opportunities right off the bat, right? I'm
currently producing an album with a girl. She's actually still a student for the recording connection. She's actually on the live sound, and I heard her she said, Junior, do you have any songs that you've done music or whatever? And I pulled out my Dropbox and I showed her a bunch of songs that I've made, but I don't have a lyricist. And I didn't know she write music, and that's the opportunities that come through Recording Connection. She's a writer, I'm a producer. We just connected, and then I heard her voice, and I was like, "What? Where have you been all my life? Like, are you kidding me?" Right? We're currently on a 12-song album. Like, we're about to wrap it up, and it'll be launched out, right? But this happens so often. So many students are eager to learn, but are also eager to perform, eager to show their abilities, and that's what we encourage. That we enjoy students that want to first vibe. The energy's got to be great, because that affects the whole, not only the people, but the studio is affected by it too. The energy, the vibe of the students, of the mentors. So we encourage that. Like I'm saying, this girl on a 12-song, I mean, I didn't know she existed, but through the Recording Connection, I met her. And now she's going to be great. I'm excited.
And think about this. I mean, anyone who's watching right now, think about this right now, is that the guys that are all in this panel together right now, we're producers and musicians when it comes down to it. So if you've got like a serious talent and you think that you would vibe with one of us, get in the studio. We may end up writing a song together, as peers, but we'll teach you how to be a peer. And that's the hard thing. That's the thing that you can spend years and years before you actually get to the point, where that studio thinks you're kind of cool at that point, but you learn to vibe. It's not like that it's nothing wrong with you. You just know how to vibe with them. You know what I'm saying? And how excited are you, Lucas, when you worked with the students, come to find out they've got some chops suddenly, and you're working on music all the time of your own, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's great. And even like past just sort of like the music and kind of to get on what you were saying about, remote opportunities and how to create opportunities for yourself in this industry, and kind of going to a specific example with a student of mine, like one of the most important things about success in the music industry, as far as pieces of advice that I've gotten from, my own personal mentors, was be an asset, right? Don't be a liability. Be an asset, not a liability. And what that means is because we are in an industry that is a highly, highly desirable industry to be in, right? People want to be musicians. People want to be engineers. They much rather do that than their, marketing job or what have you. But in order to actually break into that, being an asset for the people who are already successful in that industry is part of how you kind of get into that industry. And a lot of the times, the asset that you can bring isn't necessarily going to be a musical one. And so the example that I'm sort of bringing here is like one of my students, he is a master marketing, person for like through Facebook. He does Facebook ads like a genius. And I'm now working with him on music stuff because he's bringing this asset to me that like, that's not what I specialize in. But he's able to sort of have these relationships with me that maybe some of, my other students might not, because he's bringing he's bringing himself, he's bringing an asset to that relationship that doesn't necessarily, it's not particularly like a musical asset, but it is one that is incredibly relevant. And so that's honestly one of the biggest recommendations I can make to anybody who's trying to make it in the industry is be an asset. Try to bring anything, whether it's graphic design, whether it's marketing, whether it's branding, or just even, whether it's bringing like food or being like funny, whatever asset you can bring to the relationship, right? Or that, that environment, that's what is going to make people want to work with you. And that's the most important thing is like, do people actually want to work with you, or do you kind of, are you not that cool or not that like, useful?
And let me expand on what that asset term that you're saying means too. He's talking about specialization. He's talking about like, hey, I'm really good with food, I'm going to bring something up and I'm going to bring my specialization into it. And it's something that people will know me for. In addition, if I have other specializations, as I get more confident in music, I may refine specialization in like effects processing, or I may I may have a specialization in beat building, or I may have a specialization, and your mentor is someone who can help you find that specialization, which, believe me, there are so many specializations of music. You need someone who knows when something is rare in somebody. You're not going to know that. You may be a badass beat builder, but no one's ever told you that before. And suddenly Lucas hears it and he's like, dude, you got some chops. You better get that shit up on sounds.com quick, because some people would want to buy that, and he can help you put you with the people that you need to be with. It's all about putting you with the right tribe. It's all about the right tribe. Okay, we're getting close on time. So before we, and let me go ahead and reiterate, if you're just getting in, this is a panel with the Recording Connection on remote learning and online education in the new world. Again, my name is GW Childs. I'm here with Steve, Junior, Lucas, and Tommy. And again, there is a special offer, GW Childs Scholarship. Mention it between now and August 15th. And it's $500 off the full admission of any of our programs. Let's talk about a little bit about productivity before we close this up and start answering questions, guys. We've all talked about this last week, and I want you guys to expand on it a little bit. Is that what does productivity in music really look like? If you want to be a Drake, if you want to be Beyonce, how much time would you say you're putting in a week to be able to really put it off, whether you're in the Recording Connection or not? But if you were a student, if you're going to go in and really put your foot forward, how much time do you think you'd be putting in a week?
As much as you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
seriously.
if you love it, you're going to be doing it. Eat, sleep, and drink it. I don't know how many times. I mean, I don't know how many times I've woken up, like this with a laptop on my lap, or in the middle of something, or something's looping for like an hour and a half because you just, you're working to the point where you spent, and I've talked to successful people who do the same thing. I know producers that are like, they're on tour and they say the same thing. The guys get the MPC on his lap and he's conked out, because you just, you do it. You're doing it till you're done, and then you get up and you do it again.
You love it.
And if you don't do that, someone else is willing to, So if you love it, it ain't work.
So let's break that into hours real quick. Okay, so like if I told you guys, right?
I know it's a little inundating. It's a little,
yeah. I'm gonna be a new star, guys. Okay, but I only want to put 6 hours in a week to that. What would you say to that?
Not enough.
Not enough, right?
What's your fallback plan? Yeah. What's your plan B?
Yeah. What could I do with 6 hours a week? What do you think that would get me right there?
Well, it could get you, 6 hours a week, it's not nothing,
Yeah.
right? Is it enough to be a star? I mean, if you have an insane amount of money or an insane amount of luck, maybe.
Yeah.
But almost certainly not. Like 99.9% chance, no, you're not going to be a star. But I mean, 6 hours a week, that'll get you sort of, to a point where you're probably able to have fun. It's like a hobby, which there's nothing wrong, intrinsically with having music be a hobby. That's not, it's not that those people are bad or less than.
Yeah.
But is that enough to make a career out of it? Almost certainly not.
But at the same time, what you're saying too, though, really helps with hybridization in the sense that if you're someone who, like, say you're doing marketing already, right? And you wanted to add audio to your tool belt, that would be enough right there. You would still be able to benefit from our program. You know what I'm saying? And you would still get a studio idea of what you're doing would sound right or not.
Yeah.
It's not, you're not going to get out you're not going to be playing Coachella with 6 hours a week. But you'll get a lot out of our program with 6 hours a week. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And let me backpedal what I'd said earlier about, as much time as possible. You can, when I first started, it was MIDI. It was keyboards. It was no audio system. You wanted to put a beat together. It took, and half an hour of setup time, then time to put it together. So now you can sit down. I know guys that are making beats inside of 15 minutes. They put a beat up, and they're in the booth, So if you have 6 hours, if all you have is 6 hours worth of time, you can still make a big dent in what you want to do. It's just a matter of making sure that you manage your time well and just get in and do it, I mean, so it's all what you do with it.
Guitar, you know how much time I put into learning guitar. I was in a band back in the mid 2000s, and I was playing keys, and the guitar player decided he's gonna quit. I knew all the songs, so I said, you know what? Me and the band member said, you're gonna be the guitar player. So I said, okay, I'm gonna be the guitar player. I had never played guitar. You know what I did for 1 year? I said, you know what? I'm gonna learn this guitar. I'm gonna learn it. I'm a piano player. I'm just gonna transfer my knowledge to guitar. I would rehearse with the band from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Would go home, get dinner, spend time with the family, and then I would fall asleep with the guitar. I would literally wake up in the morning with the guitar on me because I was still practicing scales, and because I really needed that. I really wanted it. And the amount of time that you're not putting in is the amount of time you're spending on other stuff and wasting it. It could be wasted. So yes, it could be 6 hours. That's fine. Like Lucas said, or Steve said, it's a hobby at that point. But if you really want this, like Drake and like this big producers, they didn't spend 6 hours. They put every amount of time they could. It's all about how much you can put, but try to put as much as you can. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And just to kind of go on top of that, like really it is as much as you possibly can. Obviously it's going to change week to week, day to day. There are going to be weeks where you don't have 20 hours to put in, but there's going to be weeks where you do, and you're going to, like, if you really want to be as good as possible, you want to put in 20 hours, 40 hours, like 60 hours if you can. And it's because it's just going to make you that much better. But that also being said, like, it takes a second to ramp up to that. So if you're like a beginner and you're like, well, oh no, I'm not spending 20 hours a week. It's like, okay, that's okay. You don't have to start at 20 hours. You're going to want to build up to that, because at first it can be kind of difficult to approach these programs because they're really, kind of like, you don't know what you're looking at, and it's hard and it's mentally taxing to like do something that you don't know how to do. And so in those times, like, you're not going to be able to put in necessarily like 40 hours versus like after a year and a half or 2 years, like, you are a little bit more of a well-greased machine. And so putting in 20 hours doesn't feel like putting in 20 hours. It just kind of feels like, oh, I like to do this. This is what I do. This is kind of how I've based my life around, versus like that first beginning. Like, don't feel bad if you're like, oh no, I didn't put 40 hours a week in this week. It's like, it's okay. It's okay. It takes everybody. When I'm in these green rooms at DJing these shows at clubs and I'm talking to these producers, I don't think I've met a single producer who was touring who hadn't spent at least 5 years. Right? It's like, I don't think a single one had been doing it for less than 5 years. And that's a lot of time. That's a lot of time, because like 5 years at 20 hours a week, That's a lot of time, and it just takes time. There's no substitute for that. And the only thing that can even help that a little bit is that mentorship. It's sort of making that time more efficient, right? So instead of wasting 20 hours on a hi-hat, right, that is never going to be mixed well because of the way that you're approaching it, right? You have someone who's like able to kind of keep you grounded and be like, no, this is what you want to spend your time working on. Don't worry about this. Don't worry about that. This is how you're going to be able to use those 20 hours wisely, or those 6 hours wisely, or those 8 hours wisely. I think for me, just in this, I'll end it on, I think if you are serious about it, you know, even if you're like just starting out, you want to really like a minimum of 10 hours a week, a minimum of 10 hours a week. If you can get in 10 hours a week for a full year, you know, you'd be surprised about how much, you know, you can improve in that.
But before we move on, though, let's talk just for a second, though, Lucas. Like if you had someone on the swing side of it, where you have a student where you're kind of having to wake him up in the studio each morning, you know, and then he's on the song all the time, or on a song. What usually, Uriel, Lucas, Steve, what happens to a student that's like that typically in a recording connection?
Well, I'll let you guys answer because I just talked for a while.
Please, whoever wants to jump
ahead,
in on this one.
Okay.
I want to see what Mr. Steve's got to say.
Yeah, I do too, actually. Okay.
So what do you mean? You mean someone who's waking up in the studio, like you have to physically wake them up?
No, I'm saying, what about someone who's doing they're doing so many hours, they're not doing the least, they're doing more than enough hours. Right. What happens typically with one of those students that you've
it can go both ways. If they're, you know, you can work to the point where you start making mistakes because you just, you know, you're either micro focusing on things, and like you said, like that hi-hat sound that's not the big picture, or just the people, if they're there all the time, then there are gonna be opportunities that they're gonna have that are gonna present themselves because they're present. You know, I mean, I liken it to like, you know, when we first started doing stuff, I was talking about hitting the ball out of the park. It's like, okay, well, I'm in Linfield, Massachusetts. The park is like on the other side of the country. I'm not even in the park. I'm talking about hitting the ball out of the park. So you got to go to where things are, be seen, and but don't be at a point where you're working so constantly that you're burning yourself out too quickly, which is, you know, what we end up doing. I think is that what you're?
Let me rephrase real quick.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say is, like, you know, we know what the enthusiasts typically get out. You know, they're going to have a new tool in their tool belt. You know, they're going to have a new skill, and they're going to have someone that's made sure that they know how to use it properly. But what about someone who's gone above and beyond, and when they're working with you, like those students? What typically happens with the people who are putting a lot of time in with it? Like, what's the payoff in that? I mean, is it a greater payoff for people that put more time in as opposed to people that put less time in?
Yeah, it's 100. Yeah, the payoff is exponential. You know, you put the time in, and you're gonna do well. You know, it's like those are the best. Those are the people that I look for. You know, the ones that are there. They're conscientious. They're working, and they're you know. I like it. I had one student that showed up. I called him the student that never left, because he showed up one day, and then every time I turned around, he was there. You know, and he was not only just there working on his own things, but he's like, hey, it was a mess in the corner. I just swept it up. Or, hey, you know, the bathroom was, he understood what it took to basically to get somewhere. And that, like you said, you want to be a valued asset to somebody. You know,
exactly.
We like it to put, you know, and when you're a value to somebody, you're basically putting money in their pocket, so to speak. When you can do things like that, you know, you bring opportunities, you create opportunities, and opportunities are made for you. You know,
absolutely, wonderfully said. Wonderfully said. Let's.
I was way off base the first time. Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's the thing is that. Well, I mean, and I want to point one more thing out as well. Like Lucas, well, actually, all of us are project based. When you work with any of us as mentors, we like to have you bring something that's yours, right? Now, if I'm putting in 6 hours a week, I'm only really going to be able to knock out like a song with you over like the course of maybe the time that I'm with you, right? But if I'm working on, say, if I'm putting the time in, and I'm, Lucas is showing me how to write a song, or Steve showed me how to write a song, and rather than just doing one that week, I knock out like 5 sketches. I could literally finish 5 sketches in the studio with Lucas or Steve or Junior and have those. I could have those as a student walking out. I've been executive produced by these guys, and I've got something that most students don't have. You know what I'm saying? I've got content. Yeah. I've got real content with a big name on it. So that's
we
please.
Or sorry, I was just going to say we can tell when the students spend the time.
Yeah.
It like I can immediately tell like, okay, this student put in 17 to 20 hours this week, or like, okay, this student put in like 4 hours this week, and you can just tell. And
yeah. And it is a ramp up time, like you're starting. You don't start off doing 40 hours a week with it. I mean, you may start off doing 30-minute increments at a time, because I actually suggest that to some of my students. Go in 30-minute increments, because you're gonna get frustrated, and that's gonna give you some time to stop. Do 30 minutes, come back in an hour, and do 30 minutes again. So that way you're giving yourself some cool off time. And then as you get more confident and you're not having the thing blow up on you every 5 minutes, then you will, by nature, find yourself sitting there getting lost in songs and expressing yourself like the people you see in those videos, like you see in the documentaries. They're sitting there for hours and they're not thinking about the time, because they're in love. They've made something that they're in love with, but it takes a while with an instrument or a computer or a DAW or anything, until you start to feel that kind of love and synergy. And it's your mentor. Having a mentor that's there to teach you that love, that relationship, and to have that relationship with you, it's a beautiful moment. So if you're listening right now, I hope you guys caught that part of it, because it's central to this. And also, if you're tuning in right now, remember, $500 off the full admission price if you say my name and buy one of our programs for the full price before August 15th. Now, before we've got some questions before we go ahead and end, and I'd like to go ahead and start with some of these right now. Would you guys be willing to talk about some of your hardships going through your careers? What were some of your major setbacks for you guys that made you not want to get back up and make music again? Have you ever experienced anything like that? This came from Cody. Who wants to take this one?
I'll jump in.
Please, Steve.
Just not focusing on, when you get yourself spread too thin, you can easily burn out. Like it's you just staying focused on making the one thing in your life and your career is basically what's going to keep you from burning out. I mean, I did the bi-coastal thing for years, where I was basically working in studios in LA 7 days a week. On the 7th day, it's not like biblical, but it's not. You just you do a couple of errands and then you go right back to work again. And while I was doing that, I was running stuff on the East Coast. So I was up at 7 in the morning and in bed at 2 a.m. And you create your own hardships by either saying yes to too many things, or by just getting yourself to a point where you're working on too many things. There are hardships there. There are hardships with I think it's mostly really being conscious of your time and making sure you manage your time properly, so you don't get yourself into ruts. That's I guess my point.
Totally.
Yeah.
Trying to say
Sage. Yeah. That is sage wisdom. Don't overextend yourself. Don't overextend. That's the thing that bit me the worst in my career. That was my career killer for a while there. That how everybody comes back from something. That was the one for me, going extending too far. Thank you for that, Steve. Anyone else want to add on to that?
Not hardships, because, I would say that I'm very lucky in that I've had a pretty privileged life, and I've had the privilege of making music. So it's never been something where you wanted to, that's the one thing I'll say about music is like, there's never been a moment where I've been like, I don't want to make music anymore, because it's so much a part of who I am now. And that's kind of getting to like how to kind of fall in love with it, so that you're just doing it kind of naturally. But there are always going to be things where like missed opportunities, right? There's always going to be missed opportunities. There's always going to be times where, I wasn't ready, and I wish I was, and things would have gone a different way if I was ready, but I hadn't put in enough time yet. I wasn't as good as I, should have been or thought I was or whatever it was. And, that's just part of learning, right? It's those things where it's like, it didn't work out the way you thought. If you're able to pivot, if you're able to kind of, still make something, even if you've potentially missed, an opportunity. My dad, who's an entrepreneur, he says, just another once in a lifetime opportunity, right? It's like, those things happen more often than you think they will. And the key is just being prepared. And that's part of what I think Recording Connection does, is it prepares you. It puts you, education is there to prepare you for opportunities that come up.
Well, so, because that's the thing I don't think people get a lot of the time, is that mixing, music, all become autonomic processes, right? And everyone knows what a nervous piano player looks like. Everyone knows that's the same thing as a nervous mixing engineer or a nervous remixing. You can hear it in the performance later on. And your mentor can also hear it. And when you've got a mentor that says, okay, you're ready to program for a kid's show, but you're not ready to go on Coachella yet. That's important, because that's not something that you want to make a first mistake on. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And you need someone that's able to say, hey, you are ready for this, or you're not ready for this. So it's huge in that regard. We got one guy right here too, who was saying, this is a great question too. How do you keep track of so many people when you're expanding your network so quickly?
Wow, that's a great question.
Not well.
Yeah. Having systems in place is key in everything. It's tough because I don't know. I've tried the CRM thing. I've tried, how do you, it's tough. You try the thing where you basically annotate somebody's last name in capitals with what they are to, kind of do the Larry David thing, which can be sometimes inappropriate. And if anyone's familiar with that, but it's but I mean, trying to there's a lot of systems that are out there. If you have drive time and you can afford to maybe listen to a few like I'm going through that right now, like talking about how to book the studio the right way. I'm looking at either whether I'm going to use Calendarly or Acuity because it's, you go past certain simple things like Google Calendar and stuff like that. Just trying to do some research and trying to allocate the time to do that. You have your creative time, you have your promotion time, you have your organizational time. I guess it's not.
For me, you know what I found that works for me. Oh, go ahead.
Please.
I was just going to say, just to expand on what Steve was saying, there are a lot of modern technologies that can be used. But first of all, you should acknowledge and take it as a win. If your network is expanding quick enough that you can't keep track of everyone, you have a high-class problem. So let's acknowledge that win first. But definitely, like Excel spreadsheet, CRMs out there, like HubSpot is free. There's all kinds of stuff. You could Google, how to keep track, and you'll find resource available. But the biggest thing, like Steve was saying, it's like to keep track of who does what and where. There's great, tools to use that, where you're putting in their name in all caps and what they're doing and what they can do. But Excel spreadsheet is one of the basic foundations to keep track of that. That's like a good.
That's sage wisdom right there. Thank you very much. Let's go on to the next question real quick. What's a good free solid DAW that everybody recommends? Lucas, you want to take this DAW? One? Yeah.
The free DAW, the trial for Ableton.
Okay.
Yep.
I think it's almost 60 days or something, and 90. At least for me,
90 with
90 days.
90 with COVID, from what I remember. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Oh wow! So then definitely Ableton trial.
Ableton's great. I love it.
That worked for me. Inexpensive one, I guess. One of the more cheaper ones is I'd say Reaper. This doesn't have notation, but I would definitely go with Ableton Live's intro just because, or the trial version, just because it's so easy. But free as far as I work in the Mac world, so I'm thinking about any free dot in the Apple Mac world. I don't know. I've found that Reaper being the cheapest one works for me. I actually use it. I like it. I like it a lot. But
I did a 3-part series on working with it, and I found it's like the poor man's Pro Tools in a lot of ways. I mean,
Yeah.
it really it's got all of the features that Pro Tools, and they're very, very kind with you on pricing up until you get to the point that you are actually making money, and then it's kind of an honor thing, and you should kind of honor that. Keep in mind too, also there's a lot of free VST plugins out there as well, and a lot of free AU plugins, and when you mix this with Reaper as well, you're able to really kind of create and modify your own free DAW at the same time. But I will say this though, like and I think all of you would agree with me on it. The free ones are great for getting a basic understanding, but at some point it's like you're gonna want to get your Steinway or your Stradivarius, which is going to be a real DAW that the rest of the industry is working with, because you're going to want to be able to send sessions back and forth. And it's good to have one of those DAWs under your belt, even if you're not planning on going full music, just so you've got a production end. If you're doing YouTube videos, you're doing film, any of those things, having a background with the DAW is something that'll help. What were you going to say, Uriel?
I'll mention the free one that just came to mind, and
Please.
this one comes with GarageBand.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, GarageBand.
Yeah. GarageBand. Don't underestimate it. Do not underestimate it for a minute.
Yeah.
And in fact, Justice, their album Cross was made on GarageBand. I think it's one of the most famous and successful electronic music albums of all time.
Oh my
And I think that gets to sort of DAWs in general is like, yes, for me personally, I think Ableton is incredible. I think it's, it's my favorite one. Obviously Pro Tools, Logic, these are all incredibly powerful programs. But in the same way that a Stradivarius violin or like a super fancy guitar, like, yes, that's going to make it sound really great, but like a great musician is always going to sound better on a crappy guitar than a crappy musician is going to sound on a good guitar.
Yep.
And a great musician's always going to sound better with a producer too that knows what a great guitar sounds like, even if it's a crappy guitar too. So, so if you're listening, don't underestimate that for a minute, because I mean, there are those eBay guitars out there. You know what the ones I'm talking about, and they sound. They're made in Japan, and the guitarist that you probably work with got one, and they're worth, and they paid a bunch of money, but it was really worth like $1 when they first put them out, and they sound horrible when you first hear them, but if you know how to play them the right way, you get that one particular sound, and if it's with the right amp and the right pedal, right? Lucas, what were you going to say, man? Go for it, dude.
Well, I was just going to say also that stuff is true of not just instruments, but also of like production equipment too. I don't know if you guys know the artist Bon Iver. But his first album for Emma Forever Ago, which is like one of the most musical and like heartfelt albums that I've ever heard, that was recorded on an SM57 and a Focusrite.
Nice.
Like he brought that back to New York City, and he was like, "We're going to record this in a studio, right?" And the label was like, "No, this is incredible. You did an incredible job. Like, let's just use this." And you can hear it and like, obviously with the times, lo-fi was kind of big with indie and that stuff, but like, it's like, whether it's production, whether it's a guitar, whether it's violin, it's so much more about the performance. It's so much more about what the artist is trying to say than it is about the tools necessarily that they're using. Obviously the tools are important. Obviously the tools can open up new things. Like, 10 years before, he wouldn't have been able to go to Wisconsin for that winter and have recording even available to him. So, in a sense, it is the tools that gave him that opportunity to make that music in the first place. But it's not necessarily about buying the most expensive thing. It's about saying what it is that you have to say.
Exactly. And it's about knowing when it's appropriate to use it and knowing if it's going to blend with the recordings that exist out there. And you got to have someone that's got that kind of that's been there and knows it and is going to be able to say that's the one right there. Perfect. Perfect. All right, guys. So I think we're at a point of wrapping up at this point. I wanted to say thank you to the Recording Connection for allowing us to do this, allowing us to have this wonderful conversation. It's helped me a lot because I know I've been concerned during everything that's been going on, and to be able to talk with you guys and hear that there is work out there, that the music industry is still there, that there's still stuff to do. I'm feeling a heck of a lot better. If you're tuning in now too, if you're just come in or if you're going to be leaving with us, remember you're working with when you're working with Recording Connection, it's a school. It's not a school like any other school that's out there. This is 21st century education at its finest, but it's mentorship at its finest. Yes. It's getting you in the door. It's you're having someone's name like Uriel on. You're having someone's name like Lucas and saying, "Hey, I want you to come in and I want you to be a part of this ecology." And it's about having someone like Steve there who's been around for a long time and able to say, "Hey, you're doing great. You would be great here." And you know, and even knowing where you would fit in. It's by having someone like Tommy who's able to guide you in the career services part and able to facilitate your journey to people like Steve, to people like Lucas, to people like me. And again, remember, $500 off any of our courses if you say my name. I want you to get into this. I want us to be able to accept you if you're up to snuff on this. Remember that. This doesn't go for just anybody. It's not a credit card that's going to get you in. But if you think you've got it, please contact us. Please say my name before August 15th. Pay the full price, $500 off. And I guarantee you're going to experience something meaningful through the Recorded Connection. Thank you so much, guys. Lucas, Uriel, Steve, Tommy, Gervais, Leah, Brian, Michael, everyone. Thank you so much. Y'all are amazing people. I'm so humbled and excited to be working with y'all. If you need anything from me, please don't hesitate to ask. Thank you so much.
All right. Great to meet you all. Great to work.
Great to meet you. Hold on, Steve.
Yes.
Steve, how do I get in touch with you? I got to get that stereo Zoom.
All right. Yeah. Okay. I'll DM you guys my phone numbers.
All right, great.
Bye,
God
guys.
bless, man. Great talking.
Have a good one, guys.